Hello there, Booktube. I've got a tag video for you. This was a tag video that I found recently. Doesn't look like it caught on when it was originally created. It was posted by Ink and Paper blog back in April 2019, and I tried searching for it and I couldn't really find anyone else doing it, so I decided I was going to rescue this tag and resurrect it. And it is the Modern Literary Canon Tag. Now, this tag is to focus on writers from the last 100 years. So I'm going to set the cut-off date at 1925, which admittedly that stops us using some of the very early 1900s authors. So early 20th century, it means people like H.P. Lovecraft and H.G. Wells are not going to be in this list. But that's okay. That's okay. There's plenty of others that we can use. But this tag consists of three main questions, and they're fairly in-depth, and it's all about authors that you feel would make up a modern literary canon. So if you were building a canon of key authors that represent the way that you see the literary world from the last 100 years, these would be the authors that you'd be picking. So let's start. I'll explain more as we go into each question. So, question number one. There's three questions. Each question is going to be about a certain different kind of writer. So the first is going to be your literary foundation. They are authors that aren't with us anymore, but are very, very well set. They have stood the test of time. Then there's going to be your literary legacy authors. These are the ones that have a good legacy, but they're still with us, and they're still modern authors of today. Maybe they're not writing anymore, but they're still alive and able to give their say. And then there are the authors currently working, and we'll come to them in question three. So, question number one. What five authors form your modern canon's literary foundation? These are authors that are no longer with us, that have been published in the last 100 years, whose work has stood the test of time. Which five would you pick? For me, my five is fairly easy. I had a few that I was considering, but I've gone with George Orwell, because I feel that the Orwellian concept has become so entrenched in our culture that even though there's only really two books that really stand out, which is 1984 and Animal Farm, I feel those two books are going to remain canonical classics for a long time. I don't see that changing. I think that people are so familiar with the concept of the Orwellian system that George Orwell is going to be someone that people go back to time and time again. He had other writings, but I don't think they were anywhere near as prominent. But those books alone, I think, matter. Just 1984 on its own is a book that matters. It feels a little wrong picking someone who has so few works that would matter, but it doesn't need to be that the literary merit is a vast library. It could be a small library of books that are just extremely important, and that's what I feel that George Orwell brings. The next one that I would pick is Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury is similar to George Orwell in some of the writings he did, such as Fahrenheit 451. But there's other stuff like Something Wicked This Way Comes. There's a lot of different things that Ray Bradbury brings, and I think his prose are significantly improved on his contemporaries. Ray Bradbury is someone who I can legitimately say has standout prose that have, again, stood the test of time. I can't think of anyone who can produce quite that level of interest whilst maintaining such intricate prose. Aldous Huxley and George Orwell are both contemporaries that are put in the same ballpark, and whilst those books may have more influence and their message may be more well received, I think that whilst something like Fahrenheit 451 is less referenced and less remembered, the prose is at such a higher level in Bradbury's work that he bests both of them, I feel. So next, I've got Robert A. Heinlein. Now, I feel that Heinlein is one of the preeminent grandfathers of the political sci-fi. Whether it's Stranger in a Strange Land, Starship Troopers, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, they're all interesting, and they all present different political stances. They're written from a different political viewpoint, which is unique. Authors don't do that anymore. And I think Heinlein is often mischaracterized as having a particular political stance, when in actual fact I think Heinlein's political stance is difficult to really pin down. He seems to have a different political stance in every bit of writing he does. His writings are heavily political, but they are contradictory. You'll get extreme progressive liberal vibes from something like A Stranger in a Strange Land, and then you'll get out and out nationalistic libertarian vibes from something like Starship Troopers. It's weird the way his bibliography is put together. It feels like they're written by different people, but the prose match, and that's stranger still. I think it's a testament to the man that he was able to do that. So next, I've got someone who I'm not sure about, if I'm honest, but I want to put on my list because having tried to read his writing and only got a little way in, I feel that his writing is going to stick with you, even if it takes you a few times to get through it, and even if it's not really for you. It's not necessarily for me yet. I want to chew on it a little bit more. That's Gene Wolfe. Now, I've read very little Gene Wolfe because I would read a little of his fiction and then find that I'm not really following it well. But it never felt like I'm not following it because it's badly written. It felt like I was not following it because I either wasn't paying enough attention or I was missing bits. It almost feels like you have to study Wolfe, which in any other situation I would consider a penalty. I would consider that to be a negative. But I haven't made my mind up with Wolfe, and the fact that I haven't makes me think that this is worthwhile. The fact that I still want to, the fact that I want to go back and try his books again, tells me that there is more to it. So Gene Wolfe is my fourth choice. Now for my last choice, I'm being self-indulgent. I could put J.R.R. Tolkien on here, and I guarantee that's what people are expecting. I'm not going to do that. You're probably thinking, okay, so if you're not going to put Tolkien on here, it's Frank Herbert, isn't it? Because if it's not going to be Lord of the Rings, it's got to be Dune, yeah? Nope. Not putting Frank Herbert on here either. I am going very, very much personal on this one, and I'm putting an author that no one else is ever going to put in this list, and that's Mikhail Ende. He wrote The Neverending Story, and as far as I'm concerned, The Neverending Story is one of the finest pieces of childhood literature ever written. It is one of the singular best pieces I've ever experienced. So, yeah, that's what I'm going for. I feel those five should cover a lot of the various different kinds of writing of the time. I realise that I'm focusing a little bit too heavily on fantasy, sci-fi, dystopia. All of this is going to be fiction. I'm not focusing on anything else. I don't know the literary world when it comes to non-fiction or biographies, memoirs, that kind of thing. It's just not my thing, so I can't comment on that. So I'm just focusing on literature, on fiction-based literature, and I'm focusing heavily on the genres I'm familiar with. So I realise there's holes in what I'm familiar with. But that aside, let's go on to question 2. Question 2. What 5 still living authors do you believe have left a literary legacy that is already firmly established as modern classics? And I have 6 that I want to mention, which is annoying. I could move one of them down, but I've got 6 that I want to mention. So I'm going to keep this to 6, because whilst the question is for 5, I don't want to leave any of these guys off. So my first choice is Peter F. Hamilton. Now, I feel Peter F. Hamilton has created some of the best and most intricate sci-fi of his time. The Commonwealth Saga is fantastic, and it's something slightly different from the other space opera hard sci-fi that was out there at the time. He approaches things slightly differently, and it gives it a freshness. So Peter F. Hamilton is someone I would focus on. He's got loads of books out there. There's a lot of variety, and he's very consistent. Next, I want to mention Thomas Harris. Thomas Harris has fantastic prose, well-structured, well-paced books, a thriller writer, best known for the Hannibal series. I can't think of any flaws that pop out in his books. His books are just well written. They read well. They're not necessarily fast-paced. They're well-paced. They're well-paced. They're well-written. They're consistently high quality. There's a lot of technical language. I cannot find fault in his books, and I feel that he is a gold standard to try and reach for thrillers. So Thomas Harris is definitely up there. Next, I have Philip Pullman. Pullman is another author who focuses on writing for children, or at least for young adults. His Dark Materials, I feel, is a little bit aged up than what a lot of people think it is. But I think his Dark Materials is a fantastic series. The follow-up novels are great. I've not read outside of his Dark Materials, which I will admit does limit what I can say on this author. But what he's done with his Dark Materials feels like a modernised, better version of something like the Chronicles of Narnia. It feels like someone's taken a secular counter to the Chronicles of Narnia and done it better than Narnia was done. So if Narnia is a classic in your mind, I cannot justify not making his Dark Materials a classic. So, yeah, his Dark Materials just fit as a modern classic for me. It is just, it's iconic. So, Philip Pullman is in my list. Next, George R.R. Martin. And yes, I put George R.R. Martin on the list, and I didn't put Tolkien on the list. I know that will piss some people off. But yeah, George R.R. Martin is just, he is the modern fantasy genre in a nutshell. He has created so many of the tropes and expectations of a modern low magic fantasy that I would feel wrong leaving him off the list. And it's not just A Song of Ice and Fire as well. He has other books, and they're all pretty good. Admittedly, A Song of Ice and Fire is by far his best work, but his other books are well worth... Sorry about that. His other books are well worth checking out. George R.R. Martin will go down in history as one of the great authors of our time. It might be that the only thing he's really remembered for is A Song of Ice and Fire, and if that's the case, so be it. But he will still be remembered. The only bad thing is that it may well be that he's remembered for an unfinished series, because I'm not sure he's ever going to finish it. But even if he doesn't, what he's written already is still better than almost every other fantasy series out there. His unfinished series is better than pretty much every finished series out there. That's how good it is. Next, I've got an author who I feel is so well established with so many different series that all interlink, and that's Orson Scott Card. One of the best sci-fi authors, coming-of-age stories. Ender's Game is just fantastic, but he has other things on top of that. It's not just the Ender's Saga. There's other series that link into the Ender's universe, and there's some that are completely separate from it. Orson Scott Card is a fantastic writer, one of the best sci-fi authors out there. I could not recommend him enough, frankly. So he has to go on the list. But that's 5 already, and there's one person on this There's one person who needs to be on this list more than anyone else. And there's no way I could reliably say that our current literary canon is complete without this author. This author would have more entries than all of the others combined. And I know for a fact this is going to piss off Steve Donahue. And that is Stephen King. It is a special mention. Right, I'll have the others as my 5, but Stephen King gets like a special medal as the literary goat of this tag. Kind of like how if you were doing a classics canon, you'll have a book from this guy, a book from this person, a book from this person, and then the entire library of Jane Austen. And everyone's okay with that. Everyone accepts that you have one book by one author, one book by another author, one book by another, every book Jane Austen ever wrote. Stephen King's kind of like that. You need examples of these other authors. You need a good half dozen books by Stephen King to properly represent what he's offered to the literary world at this point. And yes, Stephen King is inconsistent. Some of his books are outright shite. But he's so prolific that some of his stuff is genuinely great. And some of it is mold-breaking. Some of it is genre-defying. So Stephen King has to be in this list. Yeah, one of my favourite authors for a good reason. Also an author I have a massive love-hate relationship with, because he's written some turds in his time. But yeah, that's Stephen King. And honestly, Stephen King could have been in the next one, because he's still writing now. So he could have been in question 3. But I do feel he has left a legacy of literature already. He's been writing for so many years. But question 3. What 5 authors who are currently writing, i.e. had a book out in the last 10 years, do you believe are building the literary future? So, this one's hard. Because I don't know many contemporary writers, especially not outside of the fantasy sci-fi area. I thought I was bleeding then. So I've definitely left a red mark on my eye there, haven't I? Right. Anyway, I have 5 writers here that I think are good choices that represent writing well. 1, David Mitchell. Now this one was one that I picked having only read a single book by him. But I've heard what the others are like, and I know what his reputation is. So I've read The Bone Clocks, and I'm aware of the reputation that Cloud Atlas has. I actually bought The Bone Clocks a few years back on a whim. I saw the cover and went, that looks like a really pretty cover. And he has the same name as a comedian I like. So I'm going to buy his book and see if it's any good. The Bone Clocks, it sounds cool. Sounds interesting. The blurb on the back sounded good. So I gave it a chance, and it was surprisingly engaging. It is really, really well written and quite unique. I haven't read anything like it. Maybe there's loads of authors that write in this style, but I've not seen it. It's kind of like loads of small, disparate stories that are loosely tied together, but with a through thread that connects them all at the end. Now, that doesn't sound that unique, but I've not seen it done quite so well in any other books. So yeah, David Mitchell. Next, I'm going to stick an author who I feel is actively pushing the fantasy genre, and that is Brandon Sanderson. There is no one more prolific right now than Brandon Sanderson. His prose are utilitarian, his stories are a bit basic at times. You could even argue that his stuff is kind of derivative. But at the same time, Brandon Sanderson is pushing fantasy forwards. He is creating this ubiquity within the genre that makes him the standard people go to. And I can't ignore that. His writing is good. It's enjoyable. I like what I've read so far. So yeah, Brandon Sanderson I feel is a quintessential part of modern fantasy. And even if what he's writing isn't particularly beautiful or changing the way the writing works. It's enough that it feels like he's defining the genre. He's crystallizing it. Next, I have Daniel Abraham. Now, Daniel Abraham is an author that a lot of people aren't going to be familiar with. He's written a few series, often writes in fantasy, but one of the key things that he's written is as part of the duo that is covered by the pen name James S.A. Corey. He is one half of that duo, and his writing, I put him ahead of his partner simply because he's more prolific. He's written more, so I think that if anyone would be remembered of the two, it would be him. But I would happily put them both in there. But Daniel Abraham is a fantastic writer, and I get the impression that he has offered more of the physical writing in the Expanse series of books, which is what I'm coming at here. Whilst it's written by a duo, I get the impression the actual physical writing is largely done by Daniel Abraham. A lot of ideas, plot points, the loose writing may be shared across the two people, but his prose is similar across both the Expanse and his fantasy books. So Daniel Abraham, I feel, is the one who's physically writing the words on the page, if that makes sense. And I cannot think of anyone who has done more to further the space opera as its own distinct feeling genre within sci-fi. He has created what feels like a hard sci-fi and yet dynamic and interesting setting. There's a lot of hard sci-fi. There's a lot of physics. There's a lot of correct and intricate modelling of gravity and inertia and things like that in this series. So it's not Star Trek, but at the same time, it's not something like The Martian. It's not trying to be perfectly accurate. It is focusing on both maintaining and managing that hard sci-fi expectation, whilst also having a really engaging and somewhat out there dramatic, fast-paced plot. And that's new. That's something you don't generally get. You get one or the other in most sci-fi. You don't get both. So this is a big step for science fiction, and I don't think people quite realise just how big of a step it is. So yeah, Daniel Abraham, I think, is pushing science fiction. Next, I have Adrian Tchaikovsky. Adrian Tchaikovsky is an author who is pushing smaller subgenres. He's going out of his way to find little parts of fantasy and sci-fi world, and he's turning them on their head. He's doing strange things with them, whether it's books, whether it's sci-fi books or fantasy books. He's got a unique take on pretty much everything. There's Children of Time, which is a strange sci-fi. It's not really a space opera. It's a strange sci-fi book told from an odd perspective that you wouldn't expect. You wouldn't expect from anyone else. Like, it's kind of his thing. He's done it before with Dogs of War, where he's told it from different perspectives. He's also got a fantasy series, long-running, a really in-depth fantasy series with insect-inspired factions, which are really interesting. There's a lot to like from what he's doing, and he's pushing a lot of different subgenres. Guns of the Dawn is a flintlock fantasy that is defining that subgenre. Adrian Tchaikovsky seems to be diving into tiny little subgenres that haven't really defined themselves yet, and he's going out of his way to define them. So, yeah, I think he's going to stick around for a while. I think he's going to have a cult readership for a long time. And the last one I want to put forward is China Miéville. He is a hard author to describe. What he writes is what's known as weird fiction. It's technically a form of sci-fi, but it's very, very muted. The science fiction elements are really in the background. It's more conceptual. It's more philosophical. What he's writing is a deconstruction of the way people think and feel and act around each other. His Bazlag series is fantastic. I highly recommend that trilogy. Another one that I would recommend is The City and the City, which is a really chilling look at how people view each other. I think that the social commentary that he's playing with in this low edge case sci-fi is unique in a lot of ways. So I would definitely put him forward as one of the people working today who's really pushing the genre to its edge. And those are the people that I'd recommend. Hopefully this was interesting to a few people, and I look forward to hearing other people's version of this tag, because this has the potential to be a really, really interesting tag, and I know that there's people out there that will do a lot with this. So I've got a few people I want to tag in this. I want to tag Liam's Lyceum, aka Hemvar. I think he's going to have a lot to say on this. He's going to have different books that he can put forward. He's read a lot in fantasy, so I suspect that he's going to have a very fantasy-orientated list. But that's okay. That doesn't need to be wide-reaching. It can be specific to one genre, so that would work. I would be interested to see what Michael K. Vaughan has to say about this. So I'm going to tag Michael K. Vaughan because he's got a good grasp of, like, I would say late 1800s, early 1900s. So I want to hear what he's got to say from after 1925, like from there to like 1980 is prime area that he's not really spoken too much about, but I'd like to hear more from him. I'm gonna tag Steve Donahue, obviously, if only to watch the steam come out of his ears when he realises that I put Stephen King in a modern literary classics tag. It could have been worse. I could have put Cormac McCarthy in here, like the original tag creator did. But I need to hear what Steve Donahue's going to say, because let's face it, if there's anyone who can do a modern literary canon, it's going to be him, and he's been saying he's going to do it for a long time. So this might just be the thing to spur him on to make one. So this has to tag him. I'm going to tag the Bald Book Geek, because I want to hear what he has to say on this. The Bald Book Geek has made quite a few interesting videos, but he's been pulling back. He's only been making short videos recently. I want to get him back into making some big long tags, and I want to push just a little bit more out of him, because I like his videos and I'm not seeing enough from him. So I'm gonna tag him. I'm also gonna tag Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads, because I think that Andrew will have an interesting take. He's been reading a lot. He's been powering through books at an ungodly rate. So I want to see what Andrew has to say. So those are 5 people I've tagged there, I believe. Yeah, that's 5. So I'm going to leave it at that. But if you've not been tagged and you want to do this tag, by all means do it anyway. And tell me in the comments that you're doing the tag, and I'll watch your video, as I want to see this go further. And if you want to wait until you're officially tagged, wait for Steve to do it, because Steve Donahue has a tendency to tag everyone who's watched this video, which means that you will then be officially tagged. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.